Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NCAA Tournament Bracket Preview Show. My name is Burd, here once again on the Sports Bird podcast. We got a very special guest with us today. That is Erik Haslam of HaslamMetrics.com. What's up, Erik? And it's good to have March Madness back.
I'm looking forward to it. It's been a long wait. It's been 2 years since we've seen it, so I'm ready to go, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty brutal. It feels like forever ago that I was sitting in my college apartment going crazy when Virginia won the bracket pool. But yeah, we're two years later, and just wanted to give you the opportunity before we get into the bracket, talk about all the games individually here. So not everyone watching may know what your website is. So I just wanted you to explain the website you run and how your website analyzes all the games and all the teams, and just explain what that is.
Sure. The website is called HaslamMetrics.com, HaslamMetrics.com. Really based on a lot of when I developed HaslamMetrics.com, I wanted to do it differently, and I use a lot of transitive comparisons that are focused really around shot location and shot performance. So, where do teams like to shoot from? How successful are they at obtaining those shots? How successful are they at converting those shots? And then you take into account certain special situations where your field goal percentage would be improved, such as like second chance points off of offensive rebounds, quick points, breakaway points off of steals, things like that. I started it in 2014 and I've run this website now for about 6 or 7 years. Just something that has kind of grown over time. I touch it up whenever I can. Add little nuggets here and there in the off season, automated game summaries, automated team summaries, projections, bracketology, all that kind of fun stuff. It's just the idea behind it was to perform better in the brackets each year. So here we are. So hopefully it's good timing.
Yeah, and the way I came across your website back like 3 years ago is I remember I tweeted something along the lines of like I think it was 3 years ago. I said like Villanova, Purdue, and Virginia are the three best teams. You quote tweeted me. I checked out your bio, your website, and I was like, wow, this is like awesome, because I had been used to looking to that was like when I first started getting very into college basketball. I had known what KenPom is, and then your site also was like another version of KenPom. Like a different formula essentially and I love the projected matchups and everything. So I was like, wow, this is awesome. And I've been using it ever since. And, it's great to have you on the show finally here. But what were your thoughts? What were your initial thoughts, first of all, before we get into the individual matchups? What were your initial thoughts on the bracket reveal? Anything you thought was a little bit off or anything that shocked you?
Well, a couple things surprised me a little bit. The last teams in, I thought the cut line was pretty clean compared to a lot of other years. I did miss a couple of them. A lot of people missed Louisville. That was one that I missed. I had Louisville in the field. The other one that I kind of chased, I got too much of it in my ear and social media in the last week, was Colorado State. And I thought, that in reality, I should have known that was kind of a play-in game. I even said it on Twitter that Utah State and Colorado State was going to be a play-in game, but I ended up looking at the comparing the resumes, and I thought because Colorado State had no bad losses, and down at that level, you didn't see that very often, down that low by the cut line. They had no quadrant 3 or quadrant 4 losses. I thought the committee would look at that and go, we're to give them a shot because they really haven't blown any games. They've held serve whenever they should hold serve. I thought they might get a chance to get in, and they didn't. So I missed out on that one as well. I think the two things that that jump in my head as things that were odd to me. One of them was Missouri. Missouri is not a great team via the analytics, at least from the performance rankings. That being said, Missouri had a pretty solid resume, and I thought that they would really balance that out. And they probably had the resume of a team that probably falls on the 4 line. And probably performance rankings wise, they're probably closer to that 8 line. So I put them right on the 6. The fact that they ended up getting thrown on the 9 was a big shock for me. That was one of the biggest differences. The other one that I noticed that was kind of reversed, and I think a lot of people saw this as well, was Oklahoma State and West Virginia. Oklahoma State's been red hot, has been clearly, in my mind, the better team here down the stretch, better than West Virginia. And so I thought Oklahoma State would land on that 3 line, West Virginia would land on the 4, and in fact they flipped them. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but every year with the brackets, there's always something that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's almost like they did that before the conference tournament started, and then they just
Right.
like kept it the same. And you see that like like with a few teams every year. There's something that like is a little bit off. But let's get right
Yeah.
into it here. Let's get right
Okay.
into it, starting with the West region of the bracket. Now, before we get into it, just wanted to remind everyone watching, you can follow me on Twitter at sports_Burd. You can follow Erik at Haslametrics. And yeah, let's get right into it here. First matchup. So we have Gonzaga versus the winner of the 16 playing game, Norfolk State and Appalachian State. Ironically, two teams that, have a little bit of an upset history across their, schools. You had Norfolk State that one time, beat Missouri as a 15. App
Yeah.
State, obviously in football, beat Michigan. I know I saw a lot of people tweeting about, it would have been hilarious if they had matched up App State and Michigan and in the 1-16, because it would have been like,
Yeah. Right.
but I don't think anyone thinks that they're getting any upsets done this time around. Obviously, Gonzaga, the favorite to win the tournament. So rather than talking about, the matchup in this game, let's just talk about Gonzaga's outlook for, this region. What are your thoughts on Gonzaga in this West region? In my opinion, I think that they got a pretty good draw, especially getting Virginia and Kansas, two teams that are coming to Indianapolis last minute due to COVID quarantine. I think they got a pretty easy road.
I think, and that's by design too. I look at this and go, Virginia has. I mean, you've already seen what Gonzaga did to Virginia. It's funny, the teams that are in the bracket. You got Iowa, who Gonzaga handled. You got Kansas, who Gonzaga handled. You got Virginia, who Gonzaga handled. It's three teams that they've already taken down. So that's kind of interesting that those three landed there in that position. And then you look at, even if Virginia loses, I mean, you got a Creighton team who I've liked and the analytics have liked throughout the season, but you wonder that the team chemistry thing is the thing that people keep coming back to. And we may talk about this in a bit, but I think the UC Santa Barbara pick is going to be pretty popular just because of, first of all, what has happened with McDermott and his team, and are they all one unit? That's the question. And then on top of that, what happened to Creighton in the Big East title game, which was they just got their clock cleaned by Georgetown. So is that going to linger? Is that just an outlier? Nobody really knows. UC Santa Barbara is a good team. So getting back to Gonzaga, though, I look at Gonzaga. I mean, they just have another gear compared to everybody else in college basketball. Even, I think if you go to my site and simulate, Gonzaga versus the number 2 team, Michigan, I think on a neutral court, the difference is like 5 points. And that's a massive difference. Consider, usually you're talking 1 and 2 are probably separated by a point or two. 5 points is a big difference. So I don't know if anybody touches Gonzaga. They're going to be the pick for everybody for the most part. A few people will throw Baylor in there, I'm sure. But they are the team to beat, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I've loved Gonzaga all year. I think that, there will be the haters out there that be like, oh, they never got it done before. They've been in a 1 seed position before, but this team is they're just different. Like they're obviously everyone knows that they're first in offensive efficiency and by a wide margin on your website as well. They're also third in defensive efficiency. Like this is a really good, well-rounded team. Obviously they have 5 guys who could score really well. Suggs projected to be a top 3 pick in the NBA draft, the freshman. And then you have Kispert, who is just a lights out shooter. Timmy, great big man. Nemhard, transfer. Ajayi, just so many guys. This is something you have to look at, for teams, not only teams that are well-rounded, but teams that have a lot of depth. Also, if one guy is off, another guy could pick it up. This is something that I, clearly remember from that Virginia team. They just had so many guys in 2019 between Jerome, Guy, and, they just, Hunter. They had a very talented roster. This is how I feel about Gonzaga here. They have like 5 guys who could score and produce, and that's really important. But moving here, I don't really see anyone even challenging them until possibly they face Iowa in the Elite 8. And even so, they beat Iowa pretty handedly. I'm not a huge Iowa fan. We'll talk about that as we get down here. But you just mentioned Missouri before. We have an interesting 8-9 here, Oklahoma and Missouri, 2 teams that were kind of riding high a few months ago and have kind of come back down to earth. And, you have the spread here is Oklahoma -2. Your projected score on your website, you have Oklahoma 71.59 to Missouri's 69.07. So pretty much you're very close to the spread here. Again, 2 teams that analytics would say are a little bit kind of overrated, like Oklahoma down at 36 in your performance rankings, Missouri down at 53. Both teams come in ice cold. Oklahoma 1-5 in their last 6, Missouri 3-6 in their last 9 games. These are the toughest games to pick because you have 2 teams going completely ice cold. 2 teams that were once maybe good, but kind of have fallen back down to earth. So what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Well, like you said, the momentum is not working in their favor. 270th in momentum for Missouri, 296th for Oklahoma. Oklahoma's been kind of more or less a mess since that big 16, that the top 16 reveal where I believe they were number 12 in that top 16 reveal. Then later that day, they ended up winning in overtime over West Virginia, and that kind of made me a believer temporarily. And then they kind of just went to hell. One of the interesting stats from my website is looking at the away from home metrics, and granted they're probably not as telling as they have been in the past because first of all you haven't played as many games, second of all the home court advantage or the away the advantage is questionable how much is there with no fans, but it's interesting to see that Missouri has quite the advantage. They're 78th away from home. Oklahoma is 330th away from home. Their worst performances have come away from home. Something to possibly look at if you're looking for a Missouri pick there. But yeah, those stats aren't taken into account by the analytics. So the analytics are picking right now Oklahoma by about 2.5.
Yeah, I'd probably lean Oklahoma if I had to pick right now, but honestly, that's probably one that'll go right down to the wire for me. I'm not, 100% sold on it yet. And now we move into the 5-12 matchup in this region. Another team we just spoke about, Creighton.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Creighton, a team that ranks out highly on your website. They rank 10th in your performance rankings. They are very good on both sides of the ball. 11th in offensive efficiency, 22nd defensive efficiency, 15th in 3-point percentage. So like this is a really good team. But again, the recent stuff that has happened with the program. Plus, everyone is going to remember what happens with Georgetown, where they lost by, they got destroyed. This is a spot that I feel like will be a popular 12-5 upset that won't actually happen. I don't see, there's nothing with UC Santa Barbara that like, I was, digging through them a little bit. I can't say I've watched them play this year, but 22-4, but they haven't really played anyone at all. Obviously this with a weird year, limited out of conference, so it's hard to kind of get a read on them. What are your thoughts here? I'm leaning towards Creighton right now. It'll be popular as an upset just because of what's happened lately, but I think this is just a prime example of recency bias that probably will not play much of a role.
And it's funny, this one. I think, like I said, everyone and their sister is going to be picking UC Santa Barbara here, even though if you look at the rundown of the games they've played, there was nothing there. I mean, there's literally nothing. Loyola Marymount, Florida. I mean, it's Loyola Marymount, Pepperdine, UC, that goes in the conference games. There was just nothing there. Creighton, they got their clock cleaned. This team can score. Zagorowski's game changer. The problem I always have with Creighton is going to be if they run into someone with athleticism and size on the inside of them. The team I think of might be like a USC or a Florida State or even like a Baylor or something like that. I don't know if UC Santa Barbara will present that kind of challenge for them, but this is going to be one of those where you might be able to steal some quick points from other people, because I think a lot of people are going to go. I wouldn't be surprised if I heard the majority picked UC Santa Barbara to win this game. I'm kind of with you of might be one where you can score some quick points by just going with the favorite, assuming that they had their bad game and that they're going to turn it around. And this is going to be more of the Creighton that we expected. I worried because Creighton was playing really good down the stretch. And I'm like, a part of me said when they went to that championship game, I'm like, shoot, watch them. They're going to win the Big East championship. And I'm going to be like, they're going to be ripe for the picking in the tournament.
Yeah.
And the fact that they got their clock cleaned in the last game, I would have rather they lost by about 8, but they lost by a lot more than 8. But still, you get that bad performance out of the way. Hopefully they get their act together. They start fresh. They go out there and they take care of business against a team that has not faced much opposition this year.
Yeah, and you mentioned like being different, kind of scoring points on other people in the bracket here. This is something I talked about on the video that I released this morning. You got to try to be different in some places in your bracket.
Yeah.
Personally, I like to do that a little bit more towards, Final Four, because you're not going to, even if you gain points on Creighton, it's just a first round game. It's not as anywhere near as much points as, when you get down to it. But again, we'll get to that a little bit later in the show. I want to talk about here now, moving down to the 13-4 matchup. And this is probably my favorite matchup of the entire year. Number 4, Virginia against number 13, Ohio. Spread, Virginia minus 8.5. Your projected score, UVA 70.58 to Ohio 62.86. So pretty much somewhat close to the number here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Virginia ranks 12th in your performance ranking. Ohio ranks 76th. My gut feeling is that Ohio is probably a little bit better than where they're coming in your performance rankings. I know that, and they've raised almost like 50 spots in like the last like couple of weeks
Yeah.
in your rankings. And in addition to that, I believe that Jason Preston, who is he's not as good as
Game
John
changer.
Morant, but he kind of reminds me of like, a dominant point guard on a mid-major where he could single-handedly take over a game, single-handedly, lead a team to victory. This is a team that I picked up on when they played Illinois really tough back in November. They only lost by 2 to Illinois. And look, this kid is special, Jason Preston. And I think that Virginia could have a tough time with Ohio here, especially for a team that doesn't score a lot of points. If there's one, and we've seen it in the past, obviously, if there's one team that could possibly be susceptible to an upset due to their play style, it is Virginia. Because if the offense isn't going, but this is not really a typical Virginia team, so it's kind of tough to get a read.
Well, it's funny because you brought up John Morant, and you remember who John Morant victimized in that first round game when they trounced Marquette. Well, look who's playing on Virginia. That's Hauser. Yeah. So kind of ironic, the situation, and you've seen it before with Virginia. There's times I watch them and I'm like, but let's face it, if you're tuning in to watch Virginia to get excitement, you're not going to find it. But you got to watch. This is one of those things. It's a chess match, and it can be interesting at times. But this strikes me as a team that doesn't have that. If they're going to fall behind, they're going to have problems. This is it's a little bit like what happened with Michigan State this year and with Kansas this year. Although Kansas rebounded, they really didn't have those alphas for so long, and that's I think a little bit of a problem for Virginia. And we've seen this in the past. Virginia is geared to slow the game down and build a lead. And if it's a 7-point lead, it feels like it's about 13. Problem is, it works in reverse. And all of a sudden, everybody thinks of that UMBC game a few years ago when they fall down, and all of a sudden you see Virginia throwing on a full court press. It's almost like watching someone go into full on panic because it's not something you expect. This is a team that's disciplined. They play their style of game. When you take them out of their element, anything can happen. And you're talking an Ohio team that has lost at one game since January 16th. So this is a team that's red hot. Right now, at my site, there's the momentum rating. Virginia, 324th in momentum. Ohio, 33rd in momentum. Ohio has performed well away from home. Virginia, not so well. It seems like maybe this might be the spot to go. Instead of a lot of people are going to go UC Santa Barbara, Virginia, maybe it's Creighton, Ohio. Just saying. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm really excited to pick Ohio in this game. The spread of this game actually opened at 10.5 last night. It's already down to 8.5. So I mean, it's moving in the direction of Ohio, and people are starting to realize. And I mean, for those who haven't watched Ohio, and I'm sure a lot of people haven't, they're going to realize how good Jason Preston is when they watch this game. He is truly really, really good. But let's move on here to the 6 seed versus the 11 playing game. Two teams that were on the bubble end up in the playing game. Wichita State against Drake, the 11 seeds, against the USC team who is led by a dominant force in Evan Mobley. Obviously, I mean, I believe he like swept all the awards in the Pac-12, Defensive Player of the Year, Freshman of the Year. Obviously, really special. And my initial opinion on this is that mid-major teams, whether it be Wichita State or Drake, when you get a dominant big man like that, it's just going to be very hard for teams like that to defend. Teams that may not have the size or talent just down low or just on the court at all. So I think that he's definitely going to cause big problems. I for sure like USC in this one.
I do as well. It's going to be interesting if how Drake performs. And I don't know this. Are they going to get Hemphill back for this game? I don't know. I haven't heard yet if he's going to be available for this contest in the playing game. But if they get through, the guy you didn't mention was Taj Edey. Taj Edey is one of the, as far as a guy who has contributed more. I don't think anybody expected that out of him this year, what he has been able to do for USC. It's been really impressive. I always do wonder with these teams that kind of are new to the scene. I don't think a lot of people expected USC to be here. And sometimes based on experiences, these new teams come in here and it's just like they're not ready for the spotlight. And I'm not, anybody who knows me on Twitter, there's an inside joke with me and the USC Trojans. And because one of my buddies, Tony Patelis, loves the Trojans. We just I give them crap all day long. I have nothing against the USC Trojans, but I do say this in all honesty. USC seems like one of those teams that is new to the scene. So, that wouldn't surprise me either to see anybody. I'm not a big, and you said it's Wichita State and Drake. That's the matchup, correct?
Right.
Yeah. Wichita State, the analytics probably like them as little as anybody out of anybody in the
Yeah,
at-larges.
they're 91st in your performance rankings.
Way down there, way down there. Drake, has come down, and it's really difficult to rate them accurately now because they may have Hempel, I don't know. They won't have Roman Penn, but they have actually hung tough. I think when those guys went down, a lot of people said that's it for Drake, they're done. And then they lost to Loyola Chicago in the final, and we're like, well, it was a good run, they're not going to make it. And then bubble teams kind of started dying one by one, and they snuck in the back door. So I wouldn't count them out. And could they, if Drake gets through that, and could they give USC a game? I still think, in which I'm not going to roll at Wichita State either. I think both of them could give USC a game, just because, it's that new kid on the block that hasn't been in the tournament for a couple of years, so 2 or 3 years. So I might be inclined to pick the 11 there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do make a good point about the experience factor. Definitely, for sure, plays a role. But moving on here, number 3 versus 14. Don't want to touch on this, too extensively. Kansas against Eastern Washington. The only thing that would maybe hinder Kansas here is the fact that they do have the COVID problems. Favored by 11. Yeah. You're projecting them to win by about 8.5, 9. Kansas, really good defensive team. They're definitely not the Kansas of normal. Like last year, I think if Kansas got to the tournament, they would have had a great shot to win. It's not your normal Kansas team. But I mean, they should have no problem here with Eastern Washington.
Yeah, Eastern Washington is, they're going to push the tempo a little bit more than Kansas would like to see. And this is another team that has performed well away from home. This team shoots free throws really well, but I've liked what Kansas has done. I think Kansas is a very resilient team. I would say I've criticized them. When you lose Devon Dotson and Doka Azubuike, those are big shoes to fill. And I think it took a while for them to really start to fill those shoes. And I think McCormick has done a good job of doing that. I think you got Garrett and Abaji, just a lot of different contributors that have really kind of brought them along. And even when they were getting beat by Gonzaga and they were getting beat by Baylor, they fell down double digits in both situations. They showed resiliency, and they came back and they made those games competitive again, even though they ended up losing. That's what I like to see out of this team. Now, are they ripe for the picking here? This is an Eastern Washington team that is in my top 100. They're 87th. So, usually if you see a team 130th, 140th, you go, nah, probably not. It's a fairly decent team to fall in the top 100. So I wouldn't rule them out, but I would still probably lean towards Kansas here. I think this Kansas team has a lot of heart.
Yeah, for sure. And now to the number 7-10 game, you have Oregon against VCU. Oregon favored by 6 in this game, which is interesting because you only have Oregon by 1.5. Not a big difference between them in your performance rankings. Oregon ranking 35th and VCU ranking 45th. And honestly, teams that are pretty different from each other. You have Oregon, which is a really good offensive team, not good defensively at all, could hit a lot of threes. They rank 16th in 3-point percentage. And then you have VCU, who is the complete opposite, as I just said, 14th defensively and 102nd offensively. Oregon was, I know, a team that people started to like a lot, and then they would have like a not a great performance, and then people were a little bit off them. Personally, I like Oregon in this game, but I could see them running into problems. The thing with the really good offensive teams and the teams that are good offensively but not great defensively, the problem with those teams in the tournament is that if they get nerves, then it could be a major issue. Like if the shots aren't falling and you can't get stops, then you're done. So that's why I normally I do lean a little bit on defensive teams, but I'm probably leaning Oregon still here. Basically, I guess the only overwhelming bias I have is that I watched Penn State beat VCU, so not huge reviews for VCU from my end.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I like Oregon. I like, with Will, I think that Dana Altman teams are really solid down the stretch. Typically, I've seen this in the last few years. I like Chris Duarte. I like Will Richardson. VCU with Bones Highland is a great talent. You basically had the numbers there on, when VCU is on offense, it's a number 102 versus number 100, Oregon on defense. nothing great there. But when Oregon's in possession, number 16 on offense against the VCU defense, number 14, very evenly matched on both ends of the court. So that spread, I think, is, and you said, what is the spread right now?
6, which I look, if I was picking spread, I'd pick VCU. Personally, if I'm picking to win, I'm in favor of Oregon, but I think the spread, your website speaks to it right now.
Yeah, and that's what I would think too. I'll be interesting to see if there's a deeper story behind that spread being as big as it is, but that's something to look into if you're a gambler, I guess, to see if VCU is a sound bet. But it's a tough call. I'd probably lean towards Oregon as well there.
Yeah. Very balanced, talented team, good shooting.
Mm-hmm.
But now let's move on to Iowa here. Play Grand Canyon in the first round here. Now I want to talk about Iowa more on the long-term spectrum here rather than analyzing a 15-2. I think that Iowa's probably going to meet up with Gonzaga in the Elite Eight. Personally, I just don't think that any of these teams, whether it be Virginia, who I think is getting bounced first round, or Kansas, personally, I'd rather have Iowa. Iowa is a team that, again, they're one of those teams that they're great offensively. They're not great defensively. So they worry me a little bit. I was ready to pick them out early, and I think they ended up with a pretty favorable draw up until when they hit Gonzaga. This is a team, and honestly, they have proved me wrong a little bit because I thought they were just going to get completely curb stomped against Illinois. It looked like it early, and then they kept fighting back. I mean, this is just a team that just makes a lot of shots. They're one of those resilient teams. They can get hot anytime from three. They hit the three I forget what their rating is, but I believe they're top 5 in 3-point shooting for sure. Fifth in your rankings.
Yeah.
I ultimately think they do make the run to the Elite Eight. I just think that they run into a team that basically does what they do, but a little bit better, and better on the defensive end as well.
Exactly. You nailed it. That's what I was going to say. Gonzaga, Iowa's kind of Gonzaga light, taking out the defense. Like you said, they're 4th in 3-point percentage, adjusted 3-point percentage, 20th from mid-range, 10th overall. And on top of that, they have the same kind of mentality that Gonzaga has. They can pound it inside. That's what Gonzaga loves to do. Iowa obviously can pound it inside with Luka Garza, but at the same time, you have all those shooters from the outside that can light it up, just like Gonzaga has. If those two match up again, a lot of people kind of said, like, well, Gonzaga will take care of business. I'm not so sure that Iowa will not give them a better game this time around.
Yeah, and one other thing I do want to mention here before we move on to the next region is I've always said all year, like there's a reason, like, look, I know you're not a big NBA fan yourself, but there's a reason why Garza is not projected to go highly. He's not the most athletic. I'm curious to know what would happen if USC ends up getting through and he were to match up against Evan Mobley. I think he would struggle. We saw him against Kofi. He still had 20 something points, Garza, but he was not as efficient. He was not as effective when he plays a bigger, more athletic talent. And I think that if he were to, I'd be curious to know what happens if he plays against Evan Mobley. I think that'd be extremely interesting. But
absolutely.
Before we get into this East region here, just wanted to let everyone know about Monkey Knife Fight. Monkey Knife Fight is a great place to play player prop games. You can play player prop games for every NBA game. You could play player prop games for all these college basketball games. So if you decide, you know what, I don't want to completely rely on my bracket here, you can check that out. Play player prop games, points, rebounds, overs, unders. You can check it out. You go on there, Monkey Knife Fight, promo code DUDE50, and you get 100% matchup bonus up to $50. Promo code DUDE50. So now let's get right onto it. To the East region here, we have the 1 seed Michigan facing the play-in of the 16. Michigan is an interesting one because if they don't get Livers back, I have a feeling that they could struggle a lot more than you would expect.
Yeah, and they lost 3 of 5. This is going to be the team that there are a lot of question marks about them right now. It's the funny thing about Michigan is Michigan has played some beautiful basketball. I think they had the game of the year when they played Ohio State. I loved that game. I thought that was the best college basketball game since Purdue played Tennessee in the NCAA tournament a few years ago. The thing about Michigan that makes it difficult to trust them long-term is they mix in these games that are just absolute stink bombs. I mean, you play Illinois in Ann Arbor without Sumer when you get blown out of the building. You go to the barn, and granted, playing in the barn can be tough in Minnesota, but getting blown out in Minnesota. Then there's the game against Oakland earlier in the year when Oakland had just gotten off like a 50-point loss to Xavier or something like that. And all of a sudden, Oakland takes Michigan to overtime. It's one of those things where you just kind of see, oftentimes they look really good. And then all of a sudden you just kind of scratch your head and go, what's going on here? So I think up front on the surface, this is going to be the team. If you're going to pick an 8-9 to beat somebody, this is probably going to be the victim, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Michigan, usually always in the tournament. Back to, the Beeline days. Now it looks like Juwan Howard has gotten off to a great start to his tenure.
Mhm.
Obviously has a great team, recruiting great. Michigan kind of, when they're healthy, they have everything you want, but when you lose Livers, you lose another shooter.
Yeah.
Obviously they play, strongly around Dickinson. He's a big factor down low. And when you lose a shooter, you lose a lot of spacing. It's not exactly the best thing. So I'm curious to know if Livers ends up getting back, but based on what they said the injury is, that doesn't sound promising. They said it was a stress injury to his foot. Usually that could take a while. So we'll have to see what happens there. But you mentioned the 8-9 seed, LSU against St. Bonaventure. LSU favored by 2 in this game, and you have the Bonnies winning outright. What are your thoughts on this?
Boy, Bonnies are a team that the analytics really like. I'll just say that out there. The thing about LSU is all offense, 11th in offensive efficiency, 127th in defensive efficiency. I'll say that again, 127th in defensive efficiency. St. Bonaventure, I was talking to David Warlock a little bit today. He's in the committee room, and I was asking specifically about St. Bonaventure landing where they did. Because analytically, looking at resume and looking at performance ranking and their record against elite opposition, this is a team that's far better than a 9 seed. And this is why, if you're looking for a sleeper, a team that I've watched a couple times here in the last couple of weeks that I think that could really possibly surprise some people, I would say it's St. Bonaventure. So I'm personally going to go with the Bonnies here in this one. Now, I don't know if you're going to press me into saying what's going to happen when the Bonnies play Michigan, but I don't know. I think St. Bonaventure could definitely make some noise in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I like LSU. I like LSU in general, but I think that they run into a tough matchup here. I was not all too familiar with St. Bonaventure at all, but just, looking through the statistics here, this is a team that is very good on both sides of the ball, really good defensively.
Mm-hmm.
They rank 11th in your defensive efficiency reading, and they could shoot the three, 23rd in the country at 3-point percentage. When a great 3-point shooting team and solid offensive team goes up against a team that can't defend at all, and this team could also play defense in the Bonnies. I mean, that could be problematic for
number
LSU.
one, a defensive field goal percentage on my site. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it could get interesting. And now moving on to the 5-12, another probable popular 12-5 upset pick here.
Yeah.
Colorado against Georgetown. Georgetown coming off their Big East tournament win. Colorado -5 in this game. That's pretty much what you have it as well, 70.37 to 65.93. Colorado ranks very high in your performance rankings at 13. Georgetown 44th. What is your thoughts here? How much do you weigh what Georgetown just did in the conference tournament? Because personally, I always said, I used to, when I was younger and didn't understand as much, I would overweight it. And then I would say, you know what? It's a string of games the week before. They'd have a week off in between. And now you don't really know what's going to happen. It's not, obviously momentum helps, but it's not the end all be all.
I will say this: when you go to Vegas and you play the roulette wheel and you spin the wheel 5 times and it lands red, 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 what do you expect will happen on the 6th one? It'll probably be you probably bet on black in that situation. The point being in this situation is are they due for a correction? That seems like all of a sudden they got red hot. I mean, you don't expect a team. I've said this earlier this week, when you turn on a power conference tournament on Tuesday or Wednesday, and you see those first teams go out there and you're like, oh my God, what a waste of time. They're going to be a lamb led to slaughter. They got to go through 4 rounds and they're never going to get past all the bigs in this conference. Well, Georgetown ran the gauntlet. They were in that first game and they ran the gauntlet, got all the way. But the question is, they've got all the momentum in the world right now, 5th in momentum on my site. This is a team that has played well away from home, largely because of the Big East tournament. But the question is it time for a correction? And, a lot of people don't really have a lot of respect for Colorado. The analytics like Colorado. They're at 13th in my rankings. So I think they've done a hell of a job. They got a lot of players on that. McKinley Wright, hell of a ball player. I think they've got, a really solid team there. I would probably lean for the correction here and go Colorado myself.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way as well. And now we move on to the 4-13 matchup in the East region here. Florida State against UNCG. You got Florida State spread at -11.5 on your website. It's a little bit less than that at around 9. Florida State comes in 22 in your performance rankings. UNCG outside the top 100 at 102. don't want to touch, I'm not huge on this matchup for UNCG. I just think Florida State's
Yeah.
a team that just translates very well to the tournament because Leonard Hamilton recruits the same type of team every single year. They're long, they play defense, and that usually, and they're athletic, and that usually translates well to the tournament. Obviously, we've seen this is a team that's performed amazing in the tournament the last few years. And I mean, this team may not be as talented as ones in previous years, but I do expect them to, handle UNCG pretty handily here.
Absolutely. This is a team. Florida State has solid contributors across the board. They're number one in defensive near proximity percentage. That means you're going to force UNC Greensboro to shoot the three-pointer. They're 282nd in adjusted three-point percentage. There's not a lot to be won here by UNC Greensboro on the offensive end of the court. I think that's going to be a major problem. I like what Leonard Hamilton does with his teams every year. I think I said at one point that they could make a run to the Final Four, surprise everybody. I kind of still stand by that. But we'll see. They shouldn't on paper have any trouble with UNC Greensboro here. I thought UNC Greensboro was overseeded, by the way.
Yeah. I do agree with you in terms of Florida State here. Now moving to the 6-11, we have BYU, the 6th seed, against number 11 Michigan State versus UCLA. How about that for a play-in game? My thoughts here is that BYU is a pretty impressive team, maybe a little bit overseeded based on, where they come in your performance rankings. They rank 41st in your performance rankings. But that being said, I think BYU, here's my thoughts on them. Last year, they were really, really good. And if they got to the tournament last year, they could have done some damage. I feel like, this team they've been waiting to get their chance at the tournament. Now I know it's not the same team completely at all. But this is a really good BYU team. And I think that they will present some problems for a Michigan State or a UCLA if they were to get through. But how do you value that against a Michigan State that's coached by Izzo, obviously? And, something like that can maybe push them over the edge in a game like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Coming out of that first round, the Michigan State team is a team that I actually had at number 2 in the country in my baseline ranking. So it looked pretty bad at first because I think they got all the way down into the 70s. It was kind of a train wreck, but they've come around. I mean, you've got a lot of talent on that team. A lot of big names. I mean, you got Rocket Watts, you got Joshua Langford, Malik Hall, Gabe Brown. I just remember, the other Hauser. You just have a laundry list of 7 or 8 guys who are solid contributors, and you ask yourself, what the heck are they doing way down at number 72 or whatever like that? Well, they've come around, and I think that team is still dangerous. You've seen what they can do. They've beaten Michigan, they've beaten Illinois, they've beaten Ohio State. They have the ability to do that. BYU. Yeah, it makes sense where they land on the 6th line. I thought the committee might actually give them a little bit lower, but they actually did appropriately put them on the 6th line. It's a team that really prevents teams from scoring on the inside. So if you're relying on the scoring on the inside, BYU is not going to give you a lot of chances on the inside. One of the reasons for that is they clean the glass so well defensively. Number 3 in the country in potential points allowed off of second chances, number 12 in second chance conversion percentage on that side of the court. You got Matt Harms in the middle, big guy. Now he's been playing WCC games all year. So will this change when all of a sudden you're matched up with bigger guys from the Big Ten or the Pac-12? So that'll be an interesting scenario. I think a lot of people are going to be picking 11 here, but it's going to be close.
Yeah, I think Michigan State, just because of the names on that team, the potential going in, I feel like this is a team that could possibly make a run and surprise people. I mean, I'm not even sure how surprising it would be if they made a run, given how they were ranked coming in. But let's move on here to Texas and Abilene Christian. Let's talk about Texas in general here. Texas obviously just won the Big 12. I have never been a Texas believer just because they seem to have so much talent every year and they never show up to it. But finally, the Shaka Smart came through after he seemingly was kind of on the hot seat coming into this year. I was watching Texas against Oklahoma State, and honestly, I hadn't been a huge believer in them all year, but they have some size on that team and it could present a lot of problems for opponents. I mean, them in terms of just playing an Abilene Christian team here. I mean, Abilene Christian ranks really well in your performance ranking, 67 or 14th seed. That's pretty impressive. You only have it as like a 5.5 point game. Whereas the spread is at 9. Personally though, based on me watching Texas, the size they have on that team, you have Kai Jones, Jericho Sims has been phenomenal for them. I think it'll be enough to possibly push them for a run in this tournament. I have a feeling that they could be a pretty popular pick as especially in this bracket where you have Michigan. They could be popular, like off the map Final Four pick I'm just not sure how much of that is recency bias and how much of that is actually warranted.
It's interesting because they're playing this Abilene Christian team, which is going to be, I think this is a team that was underseeded. I thought this was a team that was probably going to land on the 13 line. I knew a lot of people out there had put them on the 14 line. I looked at them and I was like, this team is better than a 14. I put them on 13. They were put on the 14. But keep in mind, when every Monday I release my ratings, my record quality, offensive and defensive efficiency. This Abilene Christian team about 3 or 4 weeks ago was in the top 10 nationally in defensive efficiency. And then when you watch them, I watched them in their tournament, and boy, they are fun to watch defensively. They're a team that is going to try to force turnover. They're going to try to force some havoc. The question is, can you do it to a team as talented as Texas? Texas is 26th offensively. Abilene Christian 35th now defensively. The problem is for Abilene Christian is always going to be on the offensive end of the court, number 111 versus Texas number 31. They're going to have to make up some ground there as well as play their best defensive ball to be in this one.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It's going to be an uphill battle for Abilene Christian, but it'll be interesting to see what they'll do, given the fact that they do rank highly in your performance rankings. But moving on here to the 7-10, UConn against Maryland. UConn favored by 2.5 in this game, and you have Maryland. You have UConn actually high in your performance rankings, top 10, ranked at number 9.
Yeah.
They're projected on your site to win this game by around 4.5. What about UConn makes them so highly ranked in your performance rankings while they're coming in as a 7 seed here?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's got to come down to usually the efficiency margins in those situations. And keep in mind that my stuff only uses games data before it goes analytically final. So in that time, UConn has performed very, very well. Add that onto the fact that a lot of this is counting a UConn team that went without Bouknight for a long period of the season. So now that he's back and he's more of a game changer, this UConn team is another team that can probably make a pretty big impact. It probably won't be the most exciting game in the world because I look at this right now and this is if you look at my game previews on my site, this is a 5 tortoise game right here where the 3 tortoise on one side is Maryland, 2 tortoise for UConn. They have very slow paces. They're going to slow this down. So you'd expect a lower score than normal. I think I have it at 66, 61 or something like that. Yeah. So it's not going to be a shootout, that. But, UConn has been a team that's been highly regarded by my analytics for, especially as of late. They're 8th in the country in momentum. Maryland, by any stretch of the imagination, not a bad team either. They're doing pretty good. They're 80th in momentum, but UConn is a hot team right now. I like that they get Bouknight back, and I would probably lean towards UConn here, personally.
Yeah, personally, because of bias, I would normally lean towards the Big Ten, but I have not been impressed. Lately, Maryland's been a lot better, but middle of the year when I watched them, they were not that impressive. I don't think they have, the talent that they once did, within the last few years. Now moving on here to Alabama. Alabama is an interesting team. They are really, really good defensively. They're not as good offensively. They do shoot a lot of threes though. So you could get, occasional hot performance from them, where they explode from 3. I think Nate Oates is a phenomenal coach. Alabama ranks 1st in defensive efficiency, on your website, 23rd in offensive efficiency. So, it's not like they're bad on offense, but they're just very, very good defensively. What are your thoughts on Alabama? Obviously everyone's going to be talking about the fact that they're playing Rick Pitino in round 1. But how much of a run do you think Alabama could make? I mean, this is a team with a lot of talent. Obviously Herb Jones is great. Quinterly, a lot of talent on this team. What are your thoughts on Alabama?
I always kind of think that usually you kind of bank on a couple 2 seeds that are going to lose in the second round. I think a lot of people are going to pick Alabama, especially when you're playing a team like a Maryland or a UConn. But you can't deny what Alabama has been able to pull off this year. Just a hell of a job by Nate Oates. Like I said, number 1 in defensive efficiency, number 6 in defensive field goal percentage, number 6 in defensive 3-point percentage. They run a very up tempo offense. They love getting out in transition. They're battle tested 5th in the country in strength of schedule. I could understand it. There's a lot of people who think that Alabama could very well surprise and run this entire bracket in the East and take down Michigan in the Elite Eight to get to the Final Four. absolutely within the realm of possibility. You know how good John Petty can be when he shoots well. Herb Jones, obviously a fantastic defender, great contributor. They've got ballers on this team. So if you wanted to pick them to go to the Final Four, I don't think anyone would ever blame you for it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I do tend to like the teams that lock up defensively for sure. If
Yeah.
Alabama has an off shooting game, like I said, they shoot a lot of threes. If they have an off shooting game, I mean, they're probably still going to be in the game for the fact that they are great on defense.
You got to have balance, and Alabama's 23rd in offense, number 1 in defense. So they've got balance. They've got top 25 on both sides.
Right. I mean, I think them versus UConn would be a phenomenal round 2 matchup.
Yeah,
if you get that.
it would.
That's going to be a very tough game to pick. Honestly, this is one of the regions where I'm currently a little bit unsure who I'm going to take for the to get to the Final Four here. I think that it's going to depend on whether Michigan gets Livers back or not, because Michigan probably would be my pick. But without Livers, I think they're extremely vulnerable.
Yeah, it's the thing I was going to say about Michigan too, about how lucky is that to get to fill the shoes of John Teskey and Xavier Simpson with Mike Smith and Hunter Dickinson. That's how lucky is that, because that was one of the things the analytics actually picked up on. I think Michigan was placed number 5 in the country before the season. No one else had them there, and I was kind of scratching my head. But hey, it turned out that way. They had the contributors with Isaiah Livers, which is, like we said, is going to be a big factor in how far they're going to go if he's going to be healthy. Having a stress fracture is no joke. It can be very painful to play on. I know people who tried to play through stress fractures and couldn't do it. I think Michigan was kind of downplaying it to kind of, I think there's a little bit of secrecy sometimes involved to kind of play that mental game of, no, he'll be fine. You don't have to worry about it. So teams have to prepare for Livers, but I wonder how much of a contributor he's going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't play him much in that first game.
Yeah, I don't think they should play him in the first game. It'll be interesting to see, even if his, let's say his mobility is eliminated, if they just stick him out there as like a shooter, it could be effective.
Right.
But let's move on here to the South region, led by Baylor as the 1 seed against number 16 Hartford. Baylor has been a team that I've liked all year. They haven't looked as good once they've came back from their, COVID hiatus. Yeah. They looked like a dominant team early in the year, and I still do think they're very good, but they have looked a little bit more vulnerable since they've come back. This is a team that is, they're one of those teams that they're great. They have one of the reasons why they're so good is they're very deep. They have so many guys. It seems like Jared Butler, Teague. So many guys, second in offensive efficiency, 32nd in defensive efficiency, which does worry me a lot, in terms of 1 seeds. Normally for like a random team, that'd be great. But for a 1 seed, it does worry me that defensive efficiency just a little bit. But this team is first in 3-point percentage at 41.28%. So really impressive team overall. What are your thoughts on Baylor in this?
I was just going to follow that up. I said, this is a team that has a very high field goal attempt rate. They get plenty of shots. And you said they make the 3 ball, but if they miss it, they clean the offensive glass efficiently too. Just a really tough team. And you're right. They have not looked quite the same across the board since COVID, but they've had some pretty nice performances in there too. So I think they're going to be the team to beat, obviously, in this region.
Yeah. I think the one thing that, really did, stand out to me in this region when the bracket came out is that they get no joke of an 8-9 matchup.
Oh yeah.
Coming up against, North Carolina, Wisconsin. I'm sure they were not happy about that draw. Either you're playing obviously historic program in North Carolina, or in my opinion, Wisconsin, a team that if they weren't, and I know, I've heard people mention this on TV the last few days, if they weren't playing in the Big Ten, who knows how the season could have gone for them. Obviously, this was a historically great year for the Big Ten. They had a lot of really tough matchups. What's going to happen when they go up against an ACC team in North Carolina? I think that Wisconsin is going to ultimately win this game. I know Wisconsin is your team. What are your thoughts on Wisconsin this year? I know that, they have, I watched my Penn State Nittany Lions go down to them after an insane comeback, but I think that, experience is really important. And that is something that Wisconsin has. These are guys who have been there before.
Yeah, they returned about 90% of their scoring, 90% of their minutes from last year. All they lost really was Brevin Pritzel. It hasn't been pretty at times, and I think that Wisconsin was a little overrated coming in the year. I think they were 13. I think what happened was they were 13-10 last year. All of a sudden, they went on this unexpected run, won 8 in a row, got a share of the Big Ten regular season title, and then COVID happened, and they did that simulation at ESPN, if you remember, where Wisconsin, they did like one simulation. Wisconsin was going to win the whole thing. And I think people got there in their head like, oh, Wisconsin's really good. And they're bringing back their whole team. We got to go with them. I think this is kind of the Wisconsin that they really are. In fact, they've looked a little disjointed. I mean, Nate Reavers doesn't look right. And they need Nate Reavers in this game. Micah Potter can't do it all himself because in the inside, you're going to have to deal with Garrison Brooks. You're going to have to deal with Day'Ron Sharp. That is going to be the concern. North Carolina, not the greatest shooting team in the world, 264th in 3-point percentage. But you've got to be able to clean the glass if you're Wisconsin. If you can't, North Carolina is going to get those second chances with the beef inside, and they will make them pay. So I think on the surface, I think the analytics right now have Wisconsin as a favorite by about 2.5. I don't know what Vegas has, but
Vegas has UNC -2. So
isn't that interesting? Yeah. So I think it would make sense from a momentum standpoint right now. North Carolina 19th in the country, Wisconsin 261st. But North Carolina, or I should say, but Wisconsin's also been inconsistent as well, 272nd in inconsistency. So that's not too good. So
yeah, I mean, it should be interesting to see. I think either one of these teams could give Baylor a little bit of a run for their money.
Oh yeah,
in the round of 32 games. So I think that Baylor kind of got stuck with a tough draw there. But moving
and just remind you, when the last time Wisconsin was an 8 seed, they took out number 1 Villanova. So
I had Villanova to win that year, so I have that fresh in my mind right now.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of Villanova here, the 5-12 seed, Villanova against Winthrop. And look, we got another popular. I feel like all these 5-12 matchups are going to be popular upset picks. And mostly because, and Villanova not playing well at all lately. They lost, obviously, Gillespie for the season, which is a huge loss. And I think as a result, they're going to be vulnerable coming in. This is possibly a game Winthrop could win. You have Villanova winning the game by, 77.16 to Winthrop's 68.42. Spread is Villanova by 6. Obviously, the performance rankings are a little bit off just because, the injuries and stuff.
You're right.
For Villanova does play an effect. So not really sure how to read this game here, but I do think that Villanova comes in as a very vulnerable team on this 5 line.
Yeah, people are going to look at, Winthrop is a very unique look to it. Obviously, they're a 1-loss team, so that's going to play into it a little bit. They do run a extremely up-tempo game, 9th in the country in tempo versus Villanova, who's 322nd. That'll be interesting. Not only do you have the Gillespie injury, but you also have the Justin Moore injury. You wonder if he's 100% ready to go. I look at this and go, the problem is Winthrop really battle tested. They're 23-1, but they're 307th in schedule strength. That could be problematic for them. Villanova has been battle tested, 22nd in the country. The big question, though, is going to come back to, injuries. Are you going to bank on a 23-1 team who has not been challenged this year, going against the Villanova team without its heart and soul of Gillespie? I could see people making the pick. I would probably, again, lean a little bit towards still sticking with Villanova, but like you said, a lot of people are going to still be picking the Winthrop in this one to upset.
Yeah, I'm probably leaning Villanova as well initially. Now moving to the 4-13, you got Purdue, North Texas. Purdue favored by 7.5. You got Purdue 64.97 to North Texas 59.17. So North Texas, solid team, ranking 72nd in your performance rankings. I haven't been that impressed with Purdue this year.
Yeah.
I don't think they're that good. I just remember my brother goes to Miami. I watched Miami beat them early in the year, and Miami is not a good team at all. And Purdue they're not what they normally are. The talent is not there from what it has been in previous years. And yet they seemingly rank solidly in the analytics, 24th in offensive efficiency, 26th in defensive efficiency. But this is just one of those teams by eye test. I'm not sure if I see it with them this year.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I'm they're sneaky as far as under the radar. They've had a lot of momentum as of late. There's nothing that jumps out at you as far as their efficiency rankings go. They're 24th in offensive efficiency, 26th in defensive efficiency, very balanced, but nothing elite there. Another game that's going to be the 5 special. You got a team like North Texas who really likes to slow it down, 355th in pace. Purdue is 285th in pace. So another game that's not going to be exciting, not an up and down game. But I'm with you. I'd probably still side with Purdue. I just don't see enough there for North Texas. They do have a very good defense, top 50 at number 48. But, I'd probably stick with Purdue in this one.
Yeah, it could get close down the line, but I do think I lean Purdue. And now moving on to number 6, Texas Tech against number 11, Utah State. Texas Tech is just one of those teams that I feel like the system translates very, very well to the NCAA tournament. Obviously, we've seen a ton of past success from Chris Beard, obviously going to the final in overtime against, loss against Virginia in the 2019 NCAA tournament. And then I believe making a run to the Elite Eight right before that in 2018. So Chris Beard has had success. Is the talent there with Texas Tech? That's something that I think is, not the same. But again, this team ranks out really well in analytics, 19th in offensive efficiency, 19th in defensive efficiency. Obviously, Matt McClung is a guy that everyone's going to talk about there. A guy who's obviously very well known nationally. And Chris Beard, again, the guy's just had success. Teams usually translate really well to the tournament. I kind of, not in terms of exactly of play style, but I kind of, see them in the same light as FSU, is just teams that just like are built for the tournament. They usually have a lot of success. At least what we've seen the last few years from Texas Tech. So I will lean Texas Tech here, but Utah State, again, an interesting team, not one that a lot of people are going to know a lot about, a little bit off the map in the Mountain West.
I could probably speak a lot to this game because I know a little bit about these teams. Texas Tech, the thing about it, it's hard to doubt Chris Beard. Chris Beard, I think, is a great coach, but it feels to me all season long that Texas Tech doesn't have that alpha. They rely kind of on McClung to be I'll call it the Marcus Howard of Texas Tech. Remember where Marquette got in trouble? They relied on Howard to do everything for them. It seems like he's kind of their go-to guy when they really need to play. And I don't know if he's not. And that's my concern. The other thing I'm going to say this about Utah State. And someone asked me yesterday, and they said, what's a player that I should watch in this game that might make a difference? I said, my answer is Neemias Keita for Utah State. He had, I think, 8 or 9 blocks in that semifinal win against Colorado State. And think about what Taco Fall did for UCF against Duke with that great team of Williamson, Barrett, and Reddish 2 years ago. He clogged that middle, gave them all kinds of trouble. And I think if you take that inside game away from Texas Tech, force them to shoot, Keita is going to be on the inside. That is going to be a very tough obstacle to overcome. So it's really hard for me to doubt Chris Beard because I think he is a great coach, but I don't know. Part of me wants to really pull the trigger on Utah State here because I think of that Taco Fall game kind of thing, how that guy in the middle can make such an impact. And Keita is that game changer on the inside for Utah State.
Yeah, he is. He's been there, it seems, forever, but he's really, really good.
Yeah.
Obviously had a few huge games in the Mountain West tournament, and a major reason why Utah State is ranked 13th in defensive efficiency, which again could give Texas Tech that problem. Like you said, they don't have the Jared Culver on this team that you could go to for instant offense. It's kind of like McClung, but is McClung really that good?
Yeah.
So anyway, moving on here to, I think, the most interesting matchup in this region. For a plethora of reasons. You had number 3 Arkansas against number 14 Colgate. I loved Arkansas going in, and ultimately they got screwed with the draw here, in my opinion. But this is a team in Colgate, number 14. I think that the analytics speak to them well. They are unbelievable on offense. They shoot the lights out. But the problem is they haven't really. I believe they've only played like 5 different opponents or something like that.
5. Yeah.
They rank 12th in offensive efficiency, 3rd in 3-point percentage. We've seen this from Colgate in the past where they've been really good at 3-point shooting, but they've gone in as like a 15, haven't really done anything. Now it seems like they could be a little bit better, but nobody knows because they've played 5 opponents. And I think, that's one of those things is your performance rankings has Arkansas winning by a hair, 79.24 to 78.54. Arkansas ranks 21st in your performance rankings. Colgate ranks 24th. But Arkansas comes in on the Vegas line favored by 9.5. So I think this is interesting, maybe an opportunity for bettors to look at Colgate, but is this Colgate team really going to get it done when they play a real team?
I think they're ranking with a big grain of salt. That why I said when you have a 5-team sample size of all your transitive comparisons, you end up giving about a dozen transitive comparisons across of all the 357 teams. That's not very much. So the analytics are doing the best they can. And that's why you saw them landing at number 8 in the net for the longest time. Granted, Colgate's a pretty good team. They're fun to watch, but when you watch them, you fear like if they're getting put into a game against teams that have athletes, it's going to be a big, a completely different game. And Arkansas's got dudes. So I think this is going to be a big problem. I think the athleticism is going to get to Colgate. I thought Colgate deserved a better seed, but they were probably penalized because they just didn't play enough opponents. The analytics peg them as a team that could be dangerous, and they are a good team. Don't get me wrong. It was fun watching them in the Patriot League tournament, but I just think Arkansas is too much for them here.
Yeah, I think if they drew a different matchup, it could have been good for them. But Arkansas, I mean, they're a Musselman-led team. Again, another really, really good coach. And they rank, Arkansas ranks ninth in defensive efficiency. And like you said, they have athletes on that team. They could, that could present problems for a team that just shoots a ton of threes. If they had played a team that was not good defensively, I would have said, well, that could be death for that team. But it is going to be tough for them against Arkansas. Now, the 7-10 game here, Florida against Virginia Tech, one of those games that, Florida -1, your classic toss-up 7-10, toss-up coin toss 7-10 game. You have Florida by a hair as well, 69.91 to Virginia Tech 67.33.
Yeah, this is two teams that really just don't jump out at me. This doesn't seem like the kind of game when this is going to show up. I'm going to be like, I haven't been into Florida too much this year. I really haven't been into Virginia Tech, although Virginia Tech was a team that landed number 13 in my preseason rankings, I think. It's not, you look at the numbers across the board. Virginia Tech offensively 54th, defensively 83rd. Florida offensively 40th, defensively 38th. Yeah, I just don't think either of these teams is going anywhere, and that means they'll probably go to the Final Four because no one's talking about them. But this is a team that flip a coin here. I think I got Florida here by, like you said, by about 2.5. Probably lean Florida, go with the numbers, but I think these two teams are probably fodder for the next round. And now I've just completely jinxed Ohio State in the second round, or Oral Roberts win or something like that. But I look at these teams and I just don't see a team that really advances very far here from either one of them personally.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know. So Virginia Tech's been kind of all over the place this year. They beat Villanova earlier in the year, and then I watched them get boat raced by Penn State, literally destroyed. Like it was not even close. Penn State, obviously a team that didn't end up making even the NIT. So yeah, I'm not huge on any of these teams. Virginia, not ranked highly at all in your analytics. Ranked 59th actually. So yeah, not huge on it. If I had to go, I would probably lean Florida right now. But again, coin toss game. And now moving to the last game, you had Ohio State, the 2 seed against Oral Roberts, the 15 seed. Ohio State favored 16.5 here. And I think what everyone's going to talk about other than Ohio State is that Oral Roberts guard Max Abmas, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, leads the NCAA in scoring at 24.2. Obviously, this is a guy who dominated the conference tournament, has dominated this year. Is this a guy who could, present a little bit of problems, or are we probably just going to see Ohio State roll through? I think that's ultimately what ends up happening, but you do get some entertainment factor there.
And it's the 15 too, so you never really do know if one could be a victim. And I just think this is kind of another one where things are going to return to the norm a little bit. I think the momentum right now is all on Oral Roberts' side. Ohio State has not looked great down the stretch, but I think this is a correction here. Ohio State's going to beat on talent. They've got Justice Ewing. They've got E.J. Liddell. Those guys are game changers, really, really brilliant playmakers. I think that Ohio State handles them very easily here.
Yeah, I am an Ohio State fan. Again, they're kind of like Iowa in the sense where they're just really good offensively, but the defense is pretty much a disaster. Like they're deep and they could shoot threes. And it seems like if you're ever watching them, it seems like they never miss a three. Like it is like that's the type of team they are. But again, when they played a team like Iowa, who is another great offensive team, I mean, they got taken care of. So
it's something to remember in your brackets is that the worst defense in the Big Ten is not Iowa. It's actually Ohio State, and it's by a pretty big margin. So keep that in mind for people picking them to go a distance.
I think they got pretty lucky with the 7-10 matchup that they're going to face, and honestly, general region. But if they do play against Arkansas, maybe Texas Tech, they could be in trouble, I think, because if they play a really good defensive team and the shots aren't falling, then, I mean, look, if they can't get stops, that's an issue.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And now moving to our last region here, the Midwest, the number 1 seed, Illinois, against Drexel, the 16. What I've been waiting to talk about here, Illinois, probably my favorite team to watch this year. And I'm honestly leaning towards picking them to win it all. I know it might not be the most popular pick. I love Gonzaga as well. I'll probably pick Illinois over Gonzaga. Partially to be a little bit different because, last year, last tournament, 2019, I originally had Duke over Virginia in my bracket. And I just flopped at the last second just to be a little bit different. I figured there wasn't a huge difference between those teams. Virginia ends up winning and it paid off huge, obviously, for me. But I think that being different in your bracket's a little bit, it's important. You shouldn't do anything different just to be different. But I actually think Illinois is capable of beating Gonzaga the way that they're playing. They are probably as close as you could get to Gonzaga in terms of the depth they have. There's just so many guys on the team. Obviously, you got Ayo and you got Kofi Coburn, and then you got
Curbelo,
a Long Island guy from went to high school near me, which is interesting because I've been following him all year, knowing that I know I have friends that actually played against him in high school. He is awesome and he's unbelievable. And you also have guys like Trent Frazier, who's been there forever. He's a senior, and he was
Demonte.
at one time, Trent Frazier was like the guy on that Illinois team, and now he's kind of molded into the role of like a veteran role player who could play great defense, hit threes. And I think the fact that you have Trent Frazier as like a fourth type player on that team is just, they're so deep. Again, we saw games where Ayo Dosunmu he wasn't playing great in terms of scoring, but you just have so many guys. You have Kofi who could just rebound like crazy, present problems in the paint. Obviously, like you said, having a dominant big is so important. They could score a ton, and they're really good on defense also, which a lot of people might not realize. They're one of those teams that, fits the criteria of ranking top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. So I'm a huge Illinois fan, and honestly, I will probably pick them to win this tournament. But
I might do the same thing. Go ahead.
But they do have a tough path here.
Yeah.
And I mean, I want to give you a chance to talk about Illinois first, but then the 8-9 is pretty interesting that they do have after that.
Yeah, no, it's I think it's a tightly wound unit. I think this has really come together. This is a team that has really stepped up their game. They just, there's times when they've looked a little bit off. You've seen that first half against Northwestern, but you've seen the same thing on a Gonzaga where they just kind of lose interest. Illinois has had the same thing, but they look so sharp right now. They just look so dialed in. And knowing that everybody is going to be picking Gonzaga, I like your way of thinking here of going all the way with Illinois, because this is a team that should go all the way to the championship game. I think they're better than Baylor. And I think if you get in that championship game, there's one team that is best suited to beat Gonzaga this year, and that's Illinois. It's not Baylor, it's Illinois. So I think if you want to kind of maybe steal the pot in your bracket tournament, go with Illinois, because so many people are going to go with Gonzaga. And if Illinois pulls that game out, you're going to look pretty smart.
Yeah, and originally with this 8-9 matchup, Loyola Chicago and Georgia Tech. First of all, I think Loyola got a little bit screwed with their seeding at 8. Like maybe I guess it was appropriate just because they were a Missouri Valley team. Didn't have all that great of a strength of schedule. Loyola Chicago is a really, really good team. I think they're going to be a popular upset pick in terms of an 8 upsetting a 1 here. But I think that, at first I thought it worried me a little bit. I was like, Illinois has a little bit tougher of a schedule than I liked. And I said, it could be an opportunity if I'm picking the bracket for, maybe more people pick against Illinois because they're tough path. But ultimately, if you think Illinois is good enough to win it all, everyone's going to end up, the team that gets to the end is going to end up probably having a bunch of tough games anyway. So, and then next thing you know, again, this is an 8-9 Loyola Chicago versus Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech could end up winning it. And then all your worries about Loyola Chicago just go out the window and you worried for nothing. It is an 8-9 ultimately. Loyola favored by 2 in this game. I love Loyola. They rank, pretty high in all the analytics, 18th on your website. This is a team that is phenomenal defensively. They rank 5th in defensive efficiency. Obviously, they have Cameron Krutwig, who everyone remembers from their Final Four run. He is still there. And then this Georgia Tech team, who's coming off an ACC tournament win, whether it be legit or not, they did, beat Florida State in the championship game. They do come in pretty hot. So I think this is probably the most intriguing 8-9 matchup.
It is, yeah. And I think this, like you said, this Loyola Chicago team is really great defensively. The question is, are they gonna? I mean, they've played good teams. They lost Wisconsin. But it's just one of those teams that you don't see a Missouri Valley team rise to the level in the performance rankings like this. Typically, the good ones usually end up landing in that 30 or 40 line. The fact that they've climbed all the way up, and they were up in like that top 10 area. Now they're number 18 for me. Just kind of shows you how solid they've been in the efficiency margins. Georgia Tech, to me, this might be another correction, like another Georgetown, where they got hot. They're hot. They're number 16 in momentum right now. Loyola Chicago is 315. You go based on that and you say, well, I'm going to go with the hot team. Again, sometimes that backfires. You go with the hot team, but it ends up having a correction, especially when you have a week off between games. Georgia Tech just got off of playing all these games, winning the ACC tournament championship. I get the feeling I'd probably just go with Loyola Chicago here. I think Loyola Chicago would be an interesting matchup with Illinois. I think Illinois would probably still win that game, but I'd be more interested to see what Loyola Chicago's defense could do against that Illinois offense.
And I mean, this could just be me thinking, but it makes me a little bit more worried the fact that all these Loyola Chicago recruits are probably recruits that probably got turned away by Illinois. There'll be a little bit more incentive,
Yeah,
obviously,
right.
as if it's an in-state battle. So yeah, Loyola is one of those teams I would have picked to go far had they not drawn Illinois, but I'm still picking them to go over Georgia Tech. And now you have the number 5-12 seed, another, tournament winner, another bid stealer in Oregon State at number 12 against number 5 Tennessee. Tennessee, one of those teams that was really popular going into the season, hasn't exactly lived up to expectations, but there still is, a lot to like about this Tennessee team. They got 2 NBA prospects on the roster. They're elite defensively. And I think that ultimately that'll be enough to get them past Oregon State and maybe even make a further run.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. When you look at the numbers across the board, I mean, when Oregon State's in possession of the ball, Tennessee has such an advantage. Oregon State is 69th in offensive efficiency. Tennessee is 4th. They're 8th in defensive field goal percentage. They're top 50 in defensive three-point percentage, top 50 in defensive mid-range percentage, top 10 in defensive near proximity percentage. They clean the glass well. It feels like it's sometimes that this is an inconsistent team, which makes them questionable long-term, 250th in consistency. But, Oregon State, I've just never been much of a believer. They had a great run, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I probably got to go with Tennessee here.
Yeah, I agree. And now moving on to another team that will undoubtedly be popular. Oklahoma State, number 4 seed against number 13 Liberty. Oklahoma State favored 9.5 in this game. And look, everyone's going to talk about Oklahoma State and Cade Cunningham, and then there's a lot to talk about, obviously, with him. He's unbelievable. He might be the best player in college basketball. He is the surefire number 1 pick in the NBA draft. And you only have Oklahoma State winning by around 5.5 here, which is interesting given the spread. Liberty, you have ranked 90th in your performance rankings, and Oklahoma State, you don't have as high as you would possibly think.
Yeah.
They're ranked 32nd. A lot of that could be just based on their slow starts to the season, and now they've really picked it up. What are your thoughts on Oklahoma State? Do you think that this is just a phantom run? Personally, I think it's just a team that is very young and kind of just learned to play with each other as the season went on. And now I think that they're finally hitting their groove. I think that it will be enough to carry them over Liberty, especially the fact that they just have Cade Cunningham. When you have that one dominant player, it's something you could really rely on, even if you're inexperienced. So while they may not make as long of a run as people may think in this tournament, I think it's good enough to get them past the first game at least.
I agree. This Oklahoma State team has the feel for me of a team that's Sweet 16 ready, but I don't know if they're Elite 8 or Final 4 ready. The analytics look at them and they put them at 32nd, probably a little bit lower than you expect. Same as like West Virginia. Don't get me wrong, Cade Cunningham is a great player, a lot of fun to watch. I think he's probably going to give Liberty fits in this game. But long term, I just don't know if Oklahoma State's got it. They are one of the most consistent teams in the country, number 2 in consistency. And so that means their results are very close to the expectation. So, I mean, if you look at the expectation, they're going to be favored to beat a couple teams here, and that probably will land them on the Sweet 16 line. But as I said, I don't know if I pick them beyond that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then you got San Diego State, the number 6 seed against Syracuse, the number 11 seed. Another really intriguing matchup here. Obviously, Syracuse will always just be like a fan favorite, but you have San Diego State, and I'm sure Syracuse will be a very popular pick here just because, people hear San Diego State and they go, all right, Mountain West, Syracuse will get it done. But San Diego State, a really, really good team. If people don't remember last year, since the tournament didn't happen, they were going to be a 1 seed. And then the tournament never ended up happening. And they're still elite defensively, solid offensively as well. They rank 17th in defensive efficiency, 32nd in offensive efficiency here, 11th in 3-point percentage. This San Diego State team is going to fly under the radar, but I'm picking them against Syracuse. I just think that they're a really good, underrated team here that is going to fly under the radar.
I hate this game because no matter what I pick here, it's going to be wrong. Syracuse is a team that throws the monkey wrench in everything, because if I pick Syracuse to win this game, they're going to lose. If I pick Syracuse to lose this game, they're going to the Elite 8. It's how Syracuse does this to me. They torture me every single year. Syracuse is 21st in offensive efficiency. San Diego State 17th. So that's very evenly matched on that side of the court. But like you said, San Diego State 32nd in offensive efficiency. Syracuse, not great defensively, number 106. That's going to be the weakness. I guess I'd probably hold serve and go with San Diego State, which means Syracuse is making a run to the Elite 8.
And that's how it always works with Syracuse.
It always does.
You would not believe the arguments I have, because I obviously have a lot of friends from the New York, New Jersey area, a lot of people who love Syracuse. we have arguments with them all the time about, Syracuse they're just outdated playing the zone these days. And it shows in their defensive rating. It doesn't work really that well anymore.
But then all of a sudden it shows up and everybody's
in the
baffled
tournament.
by it.
Yeah.
It's like crazy. It's just, you never know what Boeheim's going to bring.
And then you got West Virginia here, the number 3 seed against number 14, Morehead State. This West Virginia team is a team that I like a lot. One, obviously an elite coach. Two, it's a pretty deep team, team that has had success this year. I think they handily get by Morehead State. Morehead State, a team that ranks 139 in your performance rankings. So it's not like a lot of the other 14 seeds that we talked about that were possibly even, top 75. West Virginia, really good offensive team. They rank 17th in that category in offensive efficiency. They have McBride, Culver, a lot of players on that team who are really, really good. This is a team that I think can make a deep run. I would not be surprised if they end up playing Illinois in the Elite Eight.
Yeah, this is a team that is the biggest difference for me between my eye test and the analytics, because my eye test, I look at the big four. They've got that really strong core of players, very much like Illinois has. You don't have just 1 or 2 guys, or you don't have 9 guys. You have a group of 4 guys who are really solid contributors for West Virginia. But it's odd because they're not even a top 25 team for my analytics. So, in the past, what I've learned is I said, I'm going to use my eye test and make an adjustment. Typically the analytics end up being the one that's right. So, that's gonna be a tough one to pick, because I look at this and I go, yeah, I'm kind of a believer in West Virginia, but at the same time, I don't know, the analytics usually end up being right in March. So I probably won't pick West Virginia to go as far as most people, but don't get me wrong, West Virginia is a very, very good team. If they landed in the Final Four, I'd go, okay, that makes sense to me as well.
Right, I agree. They do have, passed the eye test. They had that unbelievable game against Baylor like a couple believe like a couple weeks ago at this point.
They got shooters, they got Culver inside, they got McBride, you got Taz Sherman. I mean, they got ballers. So definitely can play.
For sure. And now you got the number 7-10 seed here, Clemson against Rutgers. Look, Rutgers, as I said, I will normally biasly favor the Big Ten, but I think it's warranted in this point. Rutgers is a team that's been waiting years to get here. Last year, they obviously were robbed of their chance. Now they're finally here this year. Got a great player in Ron Harper Jr. and a couple of really solid players that are surrounding him. I think that Rutgers is going to take care of Clemson here. I don't know. I don't think they go any further than that. Because I think Houston's a really balanced, great team at the 2 seed there, but Rutgers is, a team that's really good defensively, ranks 24th there. So, I mean, just, I know they've been up and down this year, not the most consistent team. They rank 255 in your consistency, but I think that they will come through here against Clemson.
Yep, that's the big key. I think the fact that Rutgers is getting their big chance on the big stage is going to make. I mean, they're going to be ready to go for this one, and they got the best draw possible, because although Clemson is 23rd in record quality, they've got some really nice wins in there. They're 69th in all play percentage. They're way down there as far as the performance ranking goes. Best draw possible for Rutgers. I got to go with Rutgers in this one, and right now I show it by about a little over 2. Wouldn't be surprised one bit if Rutgers blew this one wide open.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. This is, if you're a Rutgers fan, this is a dream draw for you for sure.
It is.
And then you got Houston at the 2 seed against Cleveland State, number 15. Just want to shout out Cleveland State. They were completely demolished 2 years ago. Dennis Gates takes over when there were 3 players on the roster and manages to turn the program around in 2 years. I thought he was going to be hired as Penn State head coach. He wasn't today. Micah Shrewsbury was hired instead, but it was a good hire from Penn State. Happy with that as well. But Dennis Gates is going to get a head coaching job, at a bigger program at probably a high major, and he has been phenomenal for this Cleveland State program. Ultimately, though, Houston here should take care of business. Houston is, again, a team that people look at and say, it's Houston. How, this is one of those teams where how could they really be a 2 seed? Well, it's warranted. They rank 6th in your performance rankings, and they are top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. They rank 6th in offensive efficiency, 10th in defensive efficiency. I mean, look, again, a team that's led by Quentin Grimes, former transfer from Kansas, a guy who was obviously a really high recruit and ended up transferring there. Plus, just a really, really, really good team, 28th in momentum as well. So they are playing very well as of recently. Slow paced team, but just good all around. I expect Houston to get past Cleveland State and then probably get past Rutgers as well, where they'll face West Virginia in that Sweet 16 game. That'll be an interesting matchup to watch for sure if that happens.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I think this Houston team is, very well balanced. I think it's going to come back down to is the schedule strength prepared them enough. They're 117 in schedule strength. So that'll be something that I think people will be critical of. But yeah, this is a sleeper team that could go the distance. I could see them going to the Final Four. So if you're looking to put a 2 seed on the Final Four line, this team might be the one to do it.
Yeah,
So.
I agree for sure. And now before we head off here, obviously, thank you once again for coming on. This was great. We ran through everything. What would be your winner pick right now? I should say championship matchup and winner pick right now. I'm going, as I said before, Illinois over Gonzaga. I'm sticking with my almost eye test. It was like, 2019. As I said before, I picked Virginia to win, and they were that team that was really deep that you just saw all season, ranked highly, in analytics. And now this Illinois team is I saw them at the beginning of the year. I said, this team is just so stacked. If this team does not make a Final Four, it would be a huge, it would be a disappointment for Brad Underwood and for Illinois if he doesn't make it. And now this team is finally coming together. They're finally hitting their peak at the right time. And I think, Illinois could get it done. Plus, I think they have the best chance to beat Gonzaga. Gonzaga, obviously, great team. They're the favorite. But if you want to differentiate yourself a little bit, which I want to do, Illinois is definitely not a bad pick. I think they could do it.
I'm in complete agreement. I don't know if that'll be my final pick yet because I'll have to think about it a little bit more, delve into the matchups a little bit more. But yeah, I've said this earlier in a radio taping last week. I said that if you're looking for a team that can take down Gonzaga, it's not Baylor, it's actually Illinois. So if you want to, maybe the smart pick is Illinois here. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, for sure. And once again, you could follow me on Twitter at sports_Burd. You could follow Erik at Haslametrics. Be sure to check out his website, haslametrics.com. It'll really help you out picking your bracket. Goodbye, everyone, and good luck with your March Madness brackets this year.